Continuing Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Hugh Clough. We are in the fourth program of Marcellus, but as Hannibal, having disentangled himself from Marcellus, ranged with his army round about the country, and wasted Italy, free from all fear, Rome, Marcellus was evil spoken of. His detractors induced Publicus, Bibulus, tribune of the people, an eloquent and violent man, to undertake his accusation. He by assiduous harangues prevailed upon the people to withdraw from Marcellus the command of the army, seeing that Marcellus, said he, after brief exercise in the war, has withdrawn, as it might be, from the wrestling ground to the warm baths to refresh himself. Marcellus, on hearing this, appointed lieutenants over his camp and hastened to Rome to refute the charges against him, and there found ready drawn up an impeachment charge, consisting of these calumnies: at the day prefixed in the Flaminian circus, into which place the people had assembled themselves, Bibulus rose and accused him. Marcellus himself answered briefly and simply, but the first and most approved men of the city spoke largely and in high terms, very freely advising the people not to show themselves worse judges than the enemy, condemning Marcellus of timidity, from whom alone of all their captains the enemy fled, and as perpetually endeavored to avoid fighting with him as to fight with others. When they made an end of speaking, the accuser's hope to obtain judgment so far deceived him that Marcellus was not only absolved, but the fifth time created consul. No sooner had he entered upon this consulate, but he suppressed a great commotion in Etruria, that he had proceeded near to revolt, and visited and quieted the cities. Then, when the dedication of the temple which he had vowed out of his Sicilian spoils to honor and virtue, they thought of divine qualities as separate gods, right? Was objected to by the priests because they denied that one temple could be lawfully dedicated to two gods. He began to adjoin another into it, resenting the priest's opposition and almost converting the thing into an omen. And truly, many other prodigies also affrighted him. Some temples had been struck with lightning, and in Jupiter's temple mice had gnawed the gold. It was reported also that an ox had spoken, and that a boy had been born with a head like an elephant's. All which prodigies had indeed been attended to, but due reconciliation had not been obtained from the entities, the auspicious. It says aruspices, or I'm sure it means auspicious. Therefore, maybe it is aruspicus. Aru speaks. Okay. Therefore detained him at Rome, glowing and burning with desire to return to the war, for no man was ever inflamed with so great desire of anything as he was to fight a battle with Hannibal. It was the subject of his dreams in the night, the topic of all his consultations with his friends and familiars, nor did he present to the entities any other wish but that he might meet Hannibal in the field, and I think that he would most gladly have set upon him with both armies environed within a single camp, had he not been even loaded with honors, and had he not given proofs in many ways of his maturity and of judgment, and of prudence equal to that of any commander. You might have said that he was agitated by a youthful ambition, above what became a man of that age, for he had passed the 60th year of his life when he began his 5th consulship, the sacrifices having been offered, and all that belonged to the propitiation of the entities performed, according to the prescription of the diviners. He, at last, with his colleague, went forth to carry on the war, he tried all possible means to provoke Hannibal, who at that time had a standing camp betwixt Vantia and Venusia. Hannibal declined an engagement, but having obtained intelligence that some troops were on their way to the town of Lacri Epizephyri, placing an ambush under the little hill of Petelia, he slew 2,500 soldiers. This incensed Marcellus to revenge, and he therefore moved nearer Hannibal. Betwixt the two camps was a little hill, a tolerably secure post, covered with wood. It had steep descents on either side, and there were springs of water seen trickling down. This place was so fit and advantageous that the Romans wondered that Hannibal, who had come thither before them, had not seized upon it, but had left it to the enemies. But to him the place had seemed commodious, indeed, for a camp, but yet more commodious for an ambuscade, and that to that use he chose to put it. So in the wood and in the hollows he hid a number of archers and spearmen, confident that the commodiousness of the place would allure the Romans. Nor was he deceived in his expectation, for presently in the Roman camp they talked and disputed as if they had all been captains, how the place ought to be seized, and what great advantage they should thereby gain upon the enemies, chiefly if they transferred their camp thither. At any rate, if they strengthened the place with a fort, Marcellus resolved to go with a few horse to view it. Having called the diviner, he proceeded to sacrifice in the first victim the Aruspex. Okay, yeah, that is the right. Showed him the liver without a head. In the second, the head appeared of unusual size, and all the other indications highly promising. And, other people would say, oh, does it mean a liver without a head? Well, certainly the head can direct the body to do stuff that's bad for the liver, right? And why would the head be unusual size? Well, greater intelligence, that's not really it, right? Although you do have those African people that have more, that have a better cooling system, you could say, because, the venting, so they have these wider heads, even though they have considerably smaller brains than the than Europeans and Asians. But some of the smartest people are, those two sides of sub-Saharan Africa. But there's long been this prejudice against its head size or brain size, and that's not quite it. And when these seemed sufficient to free them from the dread of the former, the diviners declared that they were all the more terrified by the latter, because entrails too fair and promising, when they appeared after others that are maimed and monstrous, rending the change doubtful and suspicious, but nor fire nor brazen wall can keep out fate. As Pindar observes, Marcellus, therefore, taking with him his colleague Crispinus and his son, a tribune of soldiers, with 220 horse at most, among whom there was not one Roman, but all were Etruscans, except 40 Frigellans, of whose courage and fidelity he had, on all occasions, received full proof. Goes to view the place. The hill was covered with woods all over on the top of it, set a scout concealed from the sight of the enemy, but having the Roman camp exposed to his view. Upon signs received from him, the men that were placed in ambush stirred, not till Marcellus came near, and then, all stirring up in an instant, and encompassing him from all sides, attacked him with darts, and struck about and wounded the backs of those that fled, and pressed upon those who resisted. These were the 40 Fragellans, for though the Etruscans fled in the very beginning of the fight, the Fragellans formed themselves into a ring, bravely defending the consuls, till Crispinus struck with 2 darts, turned his horse to fly away, and Marcellus's side was run through with a lance, with a broad head. Then the Fragellans also, the few that remained alive, leaving the fallen consul, and rescuing young Marcellus, who also was wounded, got into the camp by flight. There were slain not much above 40, 5 victors and 18 horsemen came alive into the enemy's hands. Crispinius also died of his wounds a few days later. Such a disaster as the loss of both consuls in a single engagement was one that had never before fallen the Romans. Hannibal, little valuing the other events, as soon as he was told of Marcellus's death, immediately hastened to the hill, viewing the body and continuing for some time to observe its strength and shape. He allowed not a word to fall from him expressive of the least pride or arrogancy, nor did he show in his countenance any sign of gladness, as another perhaps would have done, when his fierce and troublesome enemy had been taken away, but, amazed by so sudden and unexpected an end, taking off nothing but his ring, gave order to have the body properly clad and adorned and honorably burned, the relics put into a silver urn with a crown of gold to cover it. He sent back to his son, but some of the Numidians, setting upon these that were carrying the urn, took it from them by force, and cast away the bones, which being told to Hannibal, "It is impossible, it seems then," he said, "to do anything against the will of God." He punished the Numidians, but took no further care of sending or recollecting the bones, conceiving that Marcellus so fell, and so lay unburied by a certain fate, so Cornelius Nepos and Varius Maximus, having left upon record, but Livy and Augustus, Caesar affirm that the urn was brought to his son and honored with a magnificent funeral, besides the monuments raised for him at Rome. There was dedicated to his memory at Catana, in Sicily, an ample wrestling place, called after him. Statues and pictures, out of those he took from Syracuse, were set up at Samothrace, in the temple of the entities named Kibiri, and in that of Minerva at Lindus, where also there was a statue of him, says Posidonius, with the following inscription: "This was, O stranger, once Rome's star divine, Claudius Marcellus, of an ancient line. To fight her wars 7 times her consul made, low in the dust her enemies he laid." The writer of the inscription has added to Marcellus's 5 consulates, his 2 proconsulates, his progeny continued in high honor even down to Marcellus, son of Octavia, sister of Augustus, whom she bore to her husband Caius Marcellus, and who died a bridegroom in the year of his aedileship, having not long before married Caesar's daughter. His mother, Octavia, dedicated the library to his honor and memory, and Caesar the theater which bears his name. And one of the I remember when my one grandfather's had a gymnasium or something as part of a college named after him or something. He taught at 3 at a community college, and he taught at a couple universities. The Ducks and the Beavers. I won't say the community college. But the there's this doctrine that you see appearing in ancient Egypt, and it's not as clear there, but you do find it in Greece, this idea that the divinity is all one. And in Arabic, the word's tawheed, the making one. And not only that, you also find their personification, the gender and animal and plant and other sorts of symbolic representations, understood as symbolic representations, and not, not really, the deity as love and honor and wisdom and all that sort of stuff is not limited to these ideas we have of how we experience this in the material world. So then you have a true monotheism when you don't have the personification, the multiple in one. But the idea that it's like some people say love and power are poles, and you can't. Oh, come on, they're not opposites. They're really not. And same thing with a lot of the others. Maybe you can't really focus fully on one versus the other when you're looking at different attributes, but they don't have to be in conflict or anything else. But in a way, we're all, whatever we believe or disbelieve, we're all trying to get at some of the same things, right?